The night air hung thick with electricity, charged with something more than just the approaching storm. Detective Riley Hartwell knew something was wrong the moment she stepped onto the abandoned research facility's grounds. The gravel crunched beneath her boots, each step sending a ripple of unease through her body. Something washed her, something that definitely wasn't human. 3 days earlier, everything had been normal. Well, as normal as life could be for a detective who specialized in unexplained cases. The manila folder tucked under her arm contained photographs that would make most people's skin crawl. Images of a creature that defied every biological classification she'd ever studied. Feathered, humanoid, impossibly beautiful and terrifyingly alien. The first report had come in from a remote research station in the northern wilderness. A team of scientists had discovered something that wasn't just extraordinary, it was world-changing. Initial communications were fragmented, filled with a mix of scientific excitement and primal fear. Something about genetic markers, something about evolution taking a completely unexpected turn. Riley remembered the late-night call from Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, her longtime friend and leading xenobiologist. "You won't believe what we found," she had whispered, her voice trembling with a combination of terror and exhilaration. "It changes everything we know about life, about our place in the universe." Then the communication went silent. Now, standing in the shadows of the abandoned facility, Riley felt the weight of her investigation pressing down on her. The wind carried a strange scent, part burnt electrical circuits, part something organic and completely alien. Feathers. She could smell feathers. The facility looked like it had been torn apart from the inside. Massive windows were shattered, their glass scattered like diamond shards across concrete floors. Computer terminals lay broken, their screens flickering with fragments of data that made no sense. Biological charts, genetic sequences, star maps. What had the research team discovered? And more importantly, what had happened to them? Her hand instinctively moved to the holster at her side. Standard issue weapon. Completely useless, she suspected, if the stories in the reports were even halfway true. The creature they had found, or created, was something beyond conventional understanding. Footprints marked the dusty floor. Not human footprints. Something else. Something with talons that had left deep gouges in the concrete, mixed with what looked like dried blood. Scientific equipment was scattered everywhere, as if a tornado had ripped through the laboratory, leaving behind only chaos and unanswered questions. A sudden movement caught her eye. A feather. Just one. Iridescent and impossibly delicate, it drifted through the air, catching the moonlight that spilled through the broken windows. Riley knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that this was more than just a scientific discovery. This was a moment that would redefine humanity's understanding of life itself. The storm outside grew closer. Lightning flickered, casting momentary shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. And in that moment of illumination, Riley saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. A reflection. Something watching her from the darkness. Something that was definitely not human. Not yet, anyway. The night was just beginning, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The reflection vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Riley blinked, her hand tightening around her flashlight. For a moment, she wondered if the stress and lack of sleep were playing tricks on her mind, but she knew better. Something was here, something that didn't want to be found. Scattered across a nearby table, Riley discovered a series of research logs. Her fingers traced the edges of water-stained papers, picking up fragments of scientific notes. Genetic anomalies. Evolutionary leaps. Words that seemed to dance between scientific precision and something closer to madness. A photograph caught her attention. A research team standing outside the facility, their faces a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Dr. Rice stood front and center, her trademark red scarf standing out against the gray wilderness backdrop. Riley recognized most of the faces. Brilliant scientists who had seemingly vanished without a trace 3 weeks ago. The team had been working on something big, something that went far beyond standard research protocols. Preliminary notes suggested they had discovered a biological specimen that challenged everything humanity understood about evolution, genetic modification, and the potential for life beyond Earth. Riley's mind drifted back to her last conversation with Elizabeth. They had been close friends since college, both driven by an insatiable curiosity about the unknown. Elizabeth had always been the one to push boundaries, to ask the questions nobody else dared to ask. "We're on the brink of something extraordinary," she had said during their last phone call. "This could change everything we know about life itself." A sudden crash from deeper within the facility snapped Riley back to the present. Her muscles tensed, every detective instinct screaming a warning. Something was moving in the shadows, something that didn't want to be discovered. The research logs told a fragmented story. Initial excitement about a unique biological specimen discovered during an expedition to a remote wilderness region. Genetic markers that didn't match any known terrestrial or extraterrestrial classification. Rapid cellular regeneration. Unprecedented adaptability. As Riley moved deeper into the facility, she noticed strange markings on the walls. Not quite scratches, not quite writing. Something in between. Organic patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own when caught in the beam of her flashlight. Another photograph caught her eye. This one was different, partially burned, but still visible. A creature, partially feathered, partially humanoid. Something that looked like it belonged to no known classification of life. The image was blurry, but Riley could see enough to understand why the research team had been both terrified and fascinated. The facility's computer systems were mostly destroyed, but one terminal flickered with life. Riley approached carefully, her training as a detective making her cautious of every potential piece of evidence. Fragments of data scrolled across the screen. Genetic sequencing, biological transformation protocols, words that suggested something far beyond simple scientific research. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning crackled, momentarily illuminating the facility's interior with a harsh electric light. In that split second, Riley saw something move in the far corner of the room. Something that didn't move like any living creature she had ever seen. Her radio, tucked into her jacket, suddenly came to life. Static. Then a voice. Familiar, but distant. "Riley, don't. Trust." The transmission cut out, leaving only the sound of her own rapid breathing. Dr. Rice's research had always been controversial, pushing the boundaries of genetic research, exploring the limits of biological adaptation. But this was something else entirely, something that suggested humanity might be on the verge of a transformation beyond comprehension. The feather Riley had seen earlier lay on the ground. She picked it up, noting how it seemed to shimmer and change color in the light. Not like any feather she had ever seen before. Not quite natural. Not quite artificial. Another crash. Closer this time. Whatever was in the facility knew she was here. And it was getting closer. Riley took a deep breath. She had come too far to turn back now. The truth was here, hidden within these walls. A truth that could change everything humanity understood about life, evolution, and our place in the universe. The night was far from over. And something was watching her. Waiting. The temperature in the facility dropped suddenly. Riley could see her breath forming small clouds in front of her face, each exhale a visible reminder of the unnatural cold that was creeping through the abandoned research center. Something was changing. The air itself felt charged with anticipation. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled out the weathered photograph of the research team again. Dr. Rice stood at the center, her confident smile now seeming like a distant memory. Riley noticed something she hadn't seen before. A strange marking on Elizabeth's neck, barely visible beneath her collar. Not a tattoo. Not a scar. Something else entirely. A sound echoed through the facility. Part whisper, part scream. Not human. Not animal. Something in between that sent a chill down Riley's spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. She knew she wasn't alone. And whatever was here knew exactly where she was. The research logs became more frantic as she pieced them together. Scattered notes spoke of a breakthrough that was simultaneously miraculous and terrifying. Genetic reconstruction. Cellular adaptability beyond anything previously imagined. Words like transformation and evolutionary leap appeared repeatedly, each mention more desperate than the last. Riley's communication device crackled to life again. This time, a clear message. "Get out," a voice whispered. Dr. Ray's voice. But something was wrong. The tone was different, strained, almost inhuman. Movement caught her eye, a shadow passing between rows of broken laboratory equipment. Too large to be human. Too fluid to be anything she recognized. Riley's training kicked in. She moved silently, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to react. The facility seemed to breathe around her. Walls that should have been solid appeared to pulse with a strange organic rhythm. Electrical systems flickered in patterns that suggested something more than random malfunction. This place was alive in a way no building should be. Another photograph. This one partially burned, but still revealing enough to make Riley's blood run cold. A transformation sequence, human to something else. Not a gradual change, but a violent, impossible shift that defied every law of biology she understood. Her radio crackled again. A burst of static. Fragments of a conversation. Subject is unstable. Cellular restructuring accelerating. No way to control. Then silence. Riley found a hidden storage room. Sealed. The lock had been torn apart from the inside. Genetic samples. Research reports. A video device. Her hands shook as she powered it on, unsure of what she might discover. The first frame made her breath catch in her throat. Dr. Reyes. But not as Riley remembered her. Something was happening. A transformation that looked painful. Impossible. The camera footage was fragmented, but clear enough to show something fundamental was changing. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the facility with a harsh electric light. In that moment of brilliant clarity, Riley saw something move at the edge of her vision. Something that was definitely not human. Not anymore. Her hand instinctively reached for her weapon, but she knew. Whatever was hunting her now was beyond any conventional defense. The research logs told a story of scientific ambition pushed beyond all ethical boundaries. A quest to understand genetic potential, to unlock the next stage of human evolution. But something had gone terribly wrong. Another sound. Closer this time. A mixture of breath and something else. Something that suggested intelligence, hunger, purpose. Riley realized she was no longer just investigating a mystery. She had become part of it. And whatever was coming, it was almost here. Time seemed to fracture around Riley. Minutes stretched into eternity, each breath a calculated risk. The facility was no longer just a building. It had become a living organism, breathing with a rhythm that felt almost sentient. Her backup would never make it in time. The storm outside had transformed the wilderness into an impassable nightmare of wind and lightning. Communication with the outside world had been reduced to sporadic bursts of static and fragmented whispers. A metallic screech echoed through the abandoned research center. Something was moving. Something that didn't follow the rules of biology or physics. Riley's training had prepared her for countless scenarios, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The genetic research logs she discovered told a story of unbridled scientific ambition. Dr. Rice and her team had been working on something revolutionary, a breakthrough in genetic modification that promised to redefine human potential. But potential, Riley was learning, was a dangerous thing. Another sound. Closer this time. A mixture of breath and something else. Something that suggested both intelligence and a primal hunger that went beyond simple predation. The sound carried a weight of anticipation that made the hair on Riley's neck stand on end. Her flashlight beam caught something moving in the peripheral shadows. Not a reflection. Not a trick of light. Something solid. Something alive. But not human. Not anymore. The research facility seemed to pulse with an internal rhythm. Broken equipment flickered with residual electrical charges. Computer screens displayed fragmented data, genetic sequences that looked more like complex musical compositions than scientific notation. Each screen told a piece of a larger, more terrifying story. Riley's mind raced back to her last conversation with Elizabeth. The excitement in her friend's voice, the hint of something extraordinary. "We're going to change everything," Elizabeth had said. Now, standing in the heart of the abandoned facility, Riley understood the true weight of those words. A feather, the same iridescent feather from earlier, drifted past her face. But it wasn't just a feather. It moved with purpose, with intention, as if alive and watching her. The temperature continued to drop. Riley's breath formed small clouds in the air, each exhale a visible reminder of the unnatural cold that was consuming the facility. Something was preparing to emerge, something that had been waiting. Fragments of the video footage she discovered played in her mind. Dr. Reyes, the transformation, the pain, the incredible biological restructuring that defied every known law of science. What had they discovered? What had they become? Another sound, a breath, a whisper. Her name, Riley. The voice was familiar, yet completely alien. Her communication device crackled to life one last time. A burst of static, a fragment of a conversation. Subject is beyond containment. Cellular restructuring complete. No way to control. Then silence. Whatever was hunting her knew exactly where she was, and it was getting closer. The facility around her seemed to breathe. Walls that should have been solid pulsed with an organic rhythm. Electrical systems flickered in patterns that suggested something more than random malfunction. This place was alive in a way no building should be. Riley gripped her weapon, but she knew. Whatever was coming would not be stopped by conventional means. Something moved at the edge of her vision. Something that was definitely not human. Not anymore. And it was almost here. The line between hunter and hunted blurred with each passing moment. Riley's breath came in short, controlled bursts. Years of detective training had prepared her for high-stakes confrontations, but nothing could have prepared her for this. A soft sound, something between a whisper and a growl, echoed through the facility's abandoned corridors. Not human, not animal. Something entirely different. The sound carried a weight of intelligence that sent a chill down Riley's spine. Whatever was here knew exactly what it was doing. Scattered research notes told a fragmented story of scientific ambition pushed beyond ethical boundaries. Genetic reconstruction, cellular adaptation, evolution reimagined. Words that seemed to dance between breakthrough and madness. Dr. Rice and her team had been chasing something extraordinary, a transformation that would redefine the very concept of human potential. The iridescent feather from earlier lay on the ground, now pulsing with a soft, almost bioluminescent light. Riley hesitated to touch it. Something told her this was more than just a simple biological artifact. It was a message, a warning. Lightning crashed outside, momentarily illuminating the facility's interior. In that split second of electric clarity, Riley caught a glimpse of something moving. A shape, a shadow, something that defied natural movement. Something that was watching her. Her communication device crackled. A voice. Familiar yet completely alien. Riley. The sound stretched, morphing between Elizabeth's voice and something else entirely. A warning? An invitation? She couldn't be sure. The facility itself seemed to be breathing. Walls that should have been solid pulsed with an organic rhythm. Broken equipment flickered with residual electrical charges, creating a symphony of light and shadow that seemed to have a purpose beyond random malfunction. Memories of her last conversation with Elizabeth flooded back. The excitement. The hint of something extraordinary. "We're going to change everything," her friend had said. Now, standing in the heart of this abandoned research center, Riley understood the true weight of those words. Another sound. Closer this time. A mixture of breath and something else. Intelligence. Hunger. Purpose. Whatever was here was calculating. Waiting. The genetic research logs told a story of unbridled scientific curiosity, experiments that pushed beyond the boundaries of known biology, cellular restructuring that suggested a complete reimagining of what it meant to be alive. But something had gone terribly wrong. Riley's hand tightened around her weapon, but she knew. Whatever was coming would not be stopped by conventional means. Reflection caught her eye. Not her own. Something moving in the broken laboratory mirrors. A shape. Partially human. Partially something else. Feathered. Intelligent. Watching. The temperature continued to drop. Her breath formed small clouds in the air, each exhale a visible reminder of the unnatural cold consuming the facility. Something was preparing to emerge. Something that had been waiting. Fragments of video footage played in her mind. Dr. Reyes. The transformation. The pain. The incredible biological restructuring that defied every known law of science. What had they discovered? What had they become? Another sound. A breath. A whisper. Closer now. The facility seemed to pulse with anticipation. Electrical systems created patterns of light that suggested more than random interference. Something was communicating. Something was preparing. Riley knew she was no longer just investigating a mystery.